Alright, so today's listening session is going to be this piece by Jonathan Harvey called Bhakti. And it's for chamber ensemble and four-channel audio. It's from 1982. But the ensemble is so big that I'm going to call it chamber orchestra. And the instrumentation is 1120, 1110, percussion, harp, piano, and then 21110. There's three violins. I'm just saying that there's two first violins. The distinction doesn't really matter. Flute doubles piccolo, oboe doubles English horn, clarinet doubles on E flat. Then there's a dedicated bass clarinet for the clarinet 2 part. Trumpet doubles on piccolo trumpet. And the percussion list is vibes, tubular bells, marimba, crotals, tam-tam, medium gong, 2 suspended cymbals, triangle, 2 wood blocks, 2 temple blocks, and 3 tom-toms. And the piano doubles on Glock. The tape part is notated in the score. There's several cues for it. And if you were to put this on nowadays, you could probably just set up a cueing system on a laptop to play the fixed media part digitally. And the that's about it for the instrumentation. Jonathan Harvey is known to use spectral techniques, and he has this notation for quarter tone accidentals. The notation for quarter tone sharp that he uses is just a plus sign, which is a little bit atypical. He also has symbols for slightly sharp and slightly flat. That would be something like a 6th tone or an 8th tone difference. And then, that's about it. So, the first page here, you can see it starts with a cello harmonic, and then cello and viola harmonics going into a tape part drone on the same note. And it's a very big piece. This is 136 pages of music, and I'm excited to see what it's all about. I think I've listened to this once before, but since then I started working with electronics myself, so I have a much better appreciation for mixed media works now. And I'll give a brief intro to this composer, and then we will get into it. Jonathan Harvey lived from 1939 to 2012, and he's a British composer. He studied with Erwin Stein and Hans Keller. Then he took up a fellowship at Princeton University, worked at IRCAM in the 80s, and was invited by Pierre Boulez to work there. And he's most famous for his works that he produced at IRCAM, which included a large composition for orchestra and electronics called Speakings. I believe there he also composed his very famous fixed media work on the bell. Let's see, Mortuos Plango Vivos Voco. If you've only heard one piece by him, it's probably this piece. That's a very successful spectral electronic work, and it's a considerable piece of research because he sampled bell at Winchester Cathedral, and then did a spectral analysis of that. But this piece was written about 2 years later. He held some sort of composer residency position with the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra. And then he was composer in residence at Huddersfield shortly before he died at age 73. So this was another ear cam commission, Bhakti. 12 short movements totaling 50 minutes with 36 subsections, each one defined by a number of instruments playing a certain pitch cell. So serial work. I think Harvey was famous for these like little pitch cells that he worked with. So there's some sort of repetition going on with the pitch over the course of the work. Symmetrical musical form. And everything is free from bass functions because it's atonal music. And then the tape is composed of sounds which are drawn from the ensemble and then mixed by a computer. It is in dialogue with the ensemble, and from what I remember, I think the tape is pretty minimal. It's very difficult to work with this sort of thing with 1980s equipment. So, and then there's a quotation from the Rig Veda at the end of each movement. So these are Sanskrit hymns that are about 4,000 years old, and I think this sort of Orientalism isn't uncommon in Harvey's work from this time. If you want to just go straight to the recording, it's in the description to this video. I'll be giving my thoughts after the listen here, and if you're curious what I think, feel free to stick around. Okay, yeah, super cool performance by Ensemble Intercontemporain. And really nice score to look at. It's very detailed, and the engraving is really nice. It's all hand engraved. It was interesting to see how the tape was notated. It was like very pitched, so you got to see like every note that was in the tape part and how it was coordinated with the ensemble. Sometimes Harvey would have the tape cue a section of the ensemble, or they'd have to, a performer would have to match dynamics with the tape or match pitch with the tape. And I thought overall the interaction between ensemble and electronics was very intriguing and interesting throughout. If you were trying to do something similar with like orchestra sounds, like pre-recorded orchestra sounds, I think this is a piece to look at for sure, because it's not so like this, the electronics aren't so foreign to the ensemble that it's intrusive. But they also have a good amount of like processing on them to the point where they sound otherworldly, and I'm sure the spatialization would play a big role in like immersing you in these sort of otherworldly extensions of the ensemble. And I think that's an important feature of it. Halfway point in the recording, there was not a lot of score left, and I was wondering like, okay, how are we fitting another half hour into this little score here? But there was some movements toward the end that were a lot sparser and had a lot more tape involved, like the solo horn movement and movement 9, where there's just like these 3 orchestral hits. So it definitely got a lot like darker and sparser as the piece progressed, and I kind of liked that more meditative stuff a bit more than the more active stuff in the first movements, which I think uh, were interesting but drew a lot of their um, gestures and rhythms from like Messiaen. I may have not been in the best mood to listen to it today. It definitely requires like you to be in the this certain headspace where you're gonna spend an hour on it, and I think it's probably a lot more successful in a live setting to be have this ensemble in front of you. His notation is really fun, and his use of aleatory is really cool. There's a lot of different contexts where he has little aleatoric cells. Sometimes only some of the ensemble has them, and others are following the conductor. Sometimes the whole ensemble has them, but their entrances are cued. Um, and sometimes it's just a soloist playing very loosely along with the tape. And I thought that that stuff was all really valuable if you wanted to write um, like a mix of aleatoric and metered music. This would be something to look at. None of the electronics sounded particularly dated to me. I think for a spectral piece for large ensemble and electronics, most teachers go straight to the Tristan Murail disintegrations. But I think this could be as valuable, maybe more valuable, because it is split up into smaller movements, and you could work with students on a movement, just talking about one or two movements with somebody, and you could point out specific uses of electronics a bit better, I think. So I think this piece does have a lot of like pedagogical value, um, and I think it's a shame that I'm discovering it through this random collection of PDFs. I really wish that a teacher had introduced me to this piece earlier, because I think it could have really informed a lot of my work. Because there's a lot of parts of this that are quite accessible. Like the first movement is just like a drone movement, and lots of students are, when they start working with electronics, that's like the first thing they do, especially electronics plus instruments. So it's important to be able to point to something and be like, hey, it's been done before. This is how Harvey did it. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we're gonna look at some Sharino. I think this is just a chamber orchestra piece. Yeah, very different from the Sharino we've looked at in the past, because we haven't. In this series, we looked at his song cycle, but this I think is just a instrumental one, and it's like 20 years older. So, yeah, that's it for today, and and yeah, that's great that we got to look at some Jonathan Harvey for the first time.